Okay, so in the last lesson, we looked at the first three steps in relation to studying a habitat. So pick the habitat you want to study, decide how much of the habitat you want to look at, measure the abiotic factors, and we talked about like what abiotic factors are. So these are some examples of what we mean by abiotic factors. So the next step then that we want to look at is we want to identify these things that are called producers. So step four. And step four is identify producers. So what are producers? Well, if we remember, so you have the sun. So imagine this is the sun here. And you have light that comes from the sun. And then you have, for example, plants. So imagine this is your plant, and this are the leaves of the plant. So these green plants, and it's in the ground. So these are the green plants, and what they're actually able to do is they're able to take this light from the sun. So this is sunlight. And they're able to, through the process of photosynthesis, they're able to convert this sunlight. They're able to take the energy from the sun, and they're able to convert it into food. And this process is what we call photosynthesis. So, what are producers then? So, if we're to look at the definition of a producer, so they're green plants. So they are green plants that can make their own food using the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so the process of photosynthesis. So this is the definition of what these things that we call producers are. So they're basically they're green plants. Now the green part of the plants, it comes from so there's parts within the animal or within the plant cell called chloroplasts, and then within the chloroplast then you have this stuff called chlorophyll, and that chlorophyll allows the plants to take the energy from the sunlight, and then convert it into food. So if we remember just very, very briefly, so the process of photosynthesis then, so what does that look like? So the plant, it takes in CO2, okay, so carbon dioxide plus water, H2O. So it takes in, so for example, it takes in CO2 from the air, and it takes in H2O from the ground. So it takes in water and CO2. And then what it does is, so using sunlight and chlorophyll, it converts, so it takes the CO2 and the H2O, and it turns it into glucose, C6H12O6, and it produces oxygen. So it takes in CO2 and it gives out oxygen. And like we use this oxygen. This is what we breathe in. But this is the process then of photosynthesis. And we've talked about that in subsequent lessons. But that's what we mean. That's what photosynthesis is. So within your habitat, the producers then are the organisms that can do this. And they're generally green plants that can take in CO2 and give out O2. And they make, so this is the food that they make. Their food is glucose. So this is what's known as glucose. This is oxygen. So this is water, H2O, and this is what's called carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide. And that's essentially what a producer is. So when you look out at your habitat, all of the plants, all those green plants there, what are known as producers. Now there's all different types of species of plants. There's a hell of a lot of them. So what we need to be able to do is, if we get a particular plant or a particular plant is shown up in our habitat, we need to be able to identify. So remember, this is the step, we want to identify the producer. So we need to be able to identify this particular producer. Now, producers are extremely important as well, because plants are described as producers because they make the food that all organisms within the habitat are dependent on for energy to live. So if we think about, for example, within a particular habitat, a lot of organisms within that habitat depend on plants. So for example, like another organism may come along, like a rabbit or something, and it'll eat this plant. And the reason it's eating the plant is because it wants to get this glucose. And the reason it wants the glucose is because it wants to make energy. And in order to make energy, it has to get this glucose. But the plant, so essentially what's happening is the energy that's coming from the sun is being locked inside the plant as glucose. And then when an animal comes along and eats the plant, it's able to get access to the energy that's within this glucose molecule. So essentially what's happening is the energy from the sun is being passed on to the producers, and then the producers then are eaten by what are called consumers, which is what we look at in subsequent lessons. And in that way, energy is actually moving from the sun to the plants, to the animals that eat the plants. And that's like a movement of energy, if you like, through these ecosystems. And like the health of all habitats, they depend on organisms that are able to do this, that are able to harness energy from the sun and keep that habitat alive. And these are plants. So plants are extremely important to our survival, and also for the health within an ecosystem as well, because they're able to do this fantastic thing that we call photosynthesis. They take the energy from the sun and they convert it into food for themselves and other organisms. I want to think about then, so you've identified a producer within your habitat, and it might be a plant, it's going to be a plant of some kind. So now what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to actually identify like what type of a plant it is, and how do we go about doing that. And in order to do that, we use these things called keys, and this is what we're going to look at now. So then, what are these things that we call keys? So we can use keys, for example, so let's say within our habitat, we have some plants and they're producing leaves that look something like this. And indeed, we can also use keys as well to identify, insects as well, or other like consumers even as well, like within the habitat. But what I want to do is I want to kind of just focus on these guys here. So what we do, so organisms, and remember, like plants are organisms, they're living things. So organisms may be identified using a key for that particular habitat that they're found in. And basically, what does a key do? So a key asks questions about the organism that you want to identify. And by answering the questions, you are led to the identity of the organism. So you can use this key, this here. So this is an example of a key to name the trees and leaves that are found in this figure below. So essentially what you do is you have a look. A key, it looks something like this. So it'll be a series of questions that you can answer yes or no. And what you do is you look at your sample, you ask yourself the question. If the question is true, it gives you instructions, and it'll ask you some more questions until you eventually get down to what type of a tree it is. So if we have a look at this, so how would we do this? So imagine we want to focus on this guy here, so this particular plant. So the first question you're going to ask are the key. So you're going to have a key for particular habitats. So are the leaves single, not divided into leaflets? So if we have a look at this, is it a single leaf or is it divided into leaflets? So we can kind of see here that this is a single leaf. If we have a look at this one here, so this one is actually divided into leaflets. So you have individual leaflets here like so. So what we can say then is to question one. Question one is true, so it tells you then to go. It tells you then to go straight to question two. So then question two: are the leaves divided into many lobes or rounded parts? So for example, are the leaves? So this is a single leaf, so it's not divided into rounded parts. Are the leaves not divided into? Are the leaves not divided into many lobes? So we can see that the leaves in this case, they're not divided into many lobes. So you can go to 3. So is the edge of the leaf smooth, or is the edge of the leaf spiked? So we can see, if we go back here to this, so are the leaves divided into many lobes or rounded parts? So we can see that the leaves here, like they are divided into lobes, like so. So see these lobes that are here? So what we can say is, are the leaves divided into many lobes? They are, so go to question 3. So are the leaves smooth? So we can see here, so they're lobes, but they're also smooth as well. If we look in contrast, if we have a look at this, there's kind of lobes, but they're more pointed here. So we can see here that we have smooth lobes. So are the leaves not divided into many lobes? Or we could say they're divided into lobes, and are they smooth lobes? They are smooth lobes. So what we can say then, that this guy here, so A, is a beech. It's a leaf from a beech tree. So we've identified this particular leaf and what plant it comes from. And then if we look in contrast, let's say if we just pick this one, so if we take part C, or item C for example, so again we go through our questions in the key. So the first question is, are the leaves single or not divided into leaflets? So it's not a single leaf. Are they divided into leaflets? Yeah, they're divided into leaflets. So you can see that you have your individual leaves here. So it tells us to go to question 4. So we go down here to question 4. Are the leaves arranged like the fingers of a hand? So they're not arranged like the fingers of a hand. We can see that they have this particular arrangement. If we look at this guy here, these are arranged like fingers of a hand, but this one isn't. So they're not. Okay, so because they're not, then we can say that this guy here is what's known as a horse chestnut. Sorry, they're not arranged like fingers of a hand. So if they're not, are the leaves arranged in pairs? So they're arranged in pairs. So you can see that these are in pairs like so. So therefore, this leaf here, it's from an ash tree. So it's from an ash tree. So these here are what are called keys, and keys then can be used to identify specific organisms. And in this case, we can use keys to identify our producers. Now you will also have keys, for example, for like organisms or invertebrates as well. So there's going to be keys for all different types of organisms that are present within a habitat. So just pause the video, and if you want to go ahead and identify, so we've identified this one and this one, so if you identify this one and this one, so give it a go. Okay, so if we have a look at this one, so we'll go to, so are the leaves single, not divided into leaflets? So yes, it is. So go to question 2. Are the leaflets divided into many lobes, or are the leaflets not divided into many lobes? So they are divided into many lobes. Are the leaflets divided into many lobes? Rounded parts, they're not rounded parts. Are the leaflets divided into many lobes? They are. So go to question 3. So are they smooth or spiked? Okay, so then this is a holly. So this is a holly leaf. If we look at this one here, are the leaflets single, not divided into leaflets, or are the leaves divided into leaflets? Okay, so we can see they're divided into leaflets. So we go to question 4. Are the leaves arranged like the fingers of a hand? They are arranged like the fingers of a hand. So therefore this guy is a horse chestnut. And then if we look at this one, so are the leaves single or not divided into leaflets? So it is a single leaf. So you go to question 2. Are the leaves divided into many lobes? They're not. Are the leaves not divided into many lobes? That is the case. So you go to question 3. So is the edge of the leaf smooth? We can see that it is smooth. So therefore this is a beech. This is the leaves from a beech tree. So again, that's just how you use a key to be able to identify, in this case, producers, let's say, within a habitat. This lesson we looked at, so step 4 in our study of a habitat. So step 4 is identifying these things called producers. So producers are green plants that can make their own food using the process of photosynthesis, so any green plants. And we can use keys, so if we identify the green plants or producers within our habitat, then we can use keys to further drill down and identify the specific species of plant that you're looking at. And that's what we mean. And again, producers are organisms that can convert sun. They can take the energy from the sun and convert it into food through this process of photosynthesis. So that's step 4, and that's identifying. That's being able to identify the producers within the habitat. Okay, so again, like these plants or producers, they're plants that convert energy, that convert light energy. So this light energy that's coming from the sun, so this is a form of energy. So light into what's called chemical energy. So this glucose here would be an example of what's called chemical energy. And animals, because they cannot produce their own food, are dependent on plants for energy. So for example, like animals that eat the plants, they're not able to do this photosynthesis process. So in order for them to get their energy, they have to consume these plants, and they have to get the energy, the chemical energy, out of the glucose in the plants. And because these other animals, they can't produce their own food, but they have to eat other plants. These animals are referred to as consumers, and that's what we're going to look at in the next lesson. So identifying consumers, let's say, within a habitat. So thank you for listening.